Bonjour, reality checkers. Today is another idiosyncratic coping skill. I'm going to tell you a story about a nervous breakdown that became a nervous breakthrough that transformed into the most robust coping tool in my kit. Then I'll tell you a little bit about what I learned about what happened. And then I'll finish up with a little bit of a rant about value, worth, and money, because those seem to be ubiquitous things for me. Thus set up. 6 years ago, I was in a very dark place. My husband had died a few years prior, and somehow that didn't kill me. It seemed like a great mistake, that he had died and I was still alive. And I was engaged in a lot of really self-destructive, death wish type behavior, out of my mind with grief and pain and barely conscious, really, of what was going on. I just knew that I was in so much pain that I couldn't stand it. Following some really, really painful experiences with the toxic people that surrounded me, that were drawn to me in my self-destructive spiral, you know, the kind of people who would support a violent downward trajectory toward death. I wasn't sleeping very well, and then one weekend, everything came to a crucible heat, and I exploded in a particularly interesting way. I'd been writing since I was 4, but mostly writing fiction, sometimes poetry, but I was never a big journal writer. I didn't really write about what was going on around me. I wrote to escape what was going on around me. But on this weekend, for 60 hours straight, I was unable to stop writing about what was going on and how I felt and what I thought, just pouring onto the page the things that I couldn't communicate to the people around me who didn't want to hear it, that I couldn't even communicate to myself. I was desperately trying to communicate this to myself, but 60 hours straight, no sleep, no food, no water, no bathroom breaks. Seriously, I was nailed to my computer, and I would be crying, and I wouldn't even be able to stop to blow my nose. Really just came open inside. That 60 hours, I produced 60,000 words, and it forever changed me. After I finally slept and woke up, everything was different. I began writing more, a lot more, and followed up with that writing with more of this self-aware writing. I felt like I was waking up for the first time in my life. The writing made me more aware and organized thoughts shattered by early ongoing trauma while my brain and personality were growing. I was putting words on experiences and then reading a lot of books and articles and things as these things came up, and I was able to name what I was feeling, or at least describe it in such a way so that I could do a Google search and then find books and check them out of the library and read them. I'd never been a big nonfiction reader before this, but now I read like I was on a mission. I often came out of these books with more questions than I went in with, but also finding them diverging into these other books that they cited, that I then started reading those too, and it was like following each book to a series of books of its own. It felt like there was a thread running through there, like each one leveled up my levels of understanding. And as I was reading these books, I was continuing to write and process. This would be my brain integrating into my everyday thinking what I was reading and what I was experiencing. And gradually, I became much more attached to this. And the more I did it, the less I jived with the people around me who couldn't and wouldn't ever understand what I was doing, what I was understanding. They'd never get it. Even if I had given them my journal, they could have read it and said, I don't understand. Because I would try to talk to people about this, but they would just not understand. So the more I filled my life with these books and this writing, the more out of date my friends became. They weren't compatible with my life anymore, as it became, as a result of this writing. I learned the term hypergraphia, which is an irresistible compulsion to write. And I read this wonderful book on it called The Midnight Disease, The Drive to Write, Writer's Block, and the Creative Brain. It's by Alice Flaherty, who is a neurologist who, after a traumatic experience for her, she miscarried twins. She had this similar experience of just going to a very dark place and then writing obsessively, compulsively, without stopping. But as a neurologist, she wanted to know what's going on in my brain. Then that, as well as reading up historically on people who were extremely prolific writers, she put together this amazing book. And she shows in here some examples of some hypergraphia, because sometimes it's not linear, sometimes it goes around on the page in various different things, and it can sometimes involve symbols and figures. Lewis Carroll, who was a very prolific writer, would sometimes write in the spiral patterns or other patterns. But hypergraphia manifests in such a range of ways. For some people it's nonsense, for some people it's repeated stuff over and over again, for some people it has like a flow and a theme to it. Hypergraphia can be a sign of a halo event for temporal lobe epilepsy. A halo event is a seizure that's not the visible tonic-clonic convulsive type that we come to associate with epilepsy. We may not be able to see something, but it can still be happening. A challenge can still be happening. Someone can have a seizure, be having a seizure, and you look at them and you don't even know. But I have had MRIs. People have looked at my brain, and I don't have epilepsy. And not everyone who does have hypergraphia has epilepsy. But it's important, if you do have like this compelling drive to write sometimes, that it may be a symptom. Virginia Ridley was a shut-in with temporal lobe epilepsy, and she wrote a 10,000-page journal of every single activity in her daily life, with a particular focus on her urinary output. For some reason, she made the news when her husband, Arthur Ridley, was accused of murdering her, but he was acquitted. The journal served as one piece of evidence of her epileptic condition. So this is all just to say that, you know, this can be a symptom of a very serious condition, though I don't have it. My hypergraphia was, and still is, often induced by stress and overwhelm. And this includes also overwhelming pleasurable excitement when I'm writing a novel and I want to find out what happens next, but I won't know until I write it. It's much like being unable to put down the page turner of a book. I've sometimes stayed up like all night just writing, just to find out what happens next to these characters, especially when I'm coming to a climactic moment. I'm most fond of the example of the exegesis of Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick is the author of a lot of science fiction works. The Man in the High Castle series is based on the book The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. The movie Blade Runner is based on the short story Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Actually, I think it's a novella. Minority Report is based on his story, and then We Can Remember For You Wholesale, I think that's the name of the original story, but anyway, Total Recall, A Scanner Darkly, those are all Philip K. Dick, and he has so many more. He, over a series of several decades, wrote letters and writings, just a whole filing cabinet full of them, spawned by a brief, overwhelming, inexplicable period in his life. Pieces of the exegesis have been published, but to publish the whole thing would be prohibitive and confusing, since it's so long and is often idiosyncratic and was filed not chronologically, but according to a different system. I know that my journals would also be very long, confusing, and idiosyncratic if anyone else ever happened to read them. I don't write them to be read by others. I don't write them even for myself to read later. I write them to process on the page. I know that intellectual understanding blocks empathy, But intellectual analysis can also put me at one cool remove from overwhelming emotions and flashbacks and experiences rather than drowning in them. I work through things in writing. I interrogate and articulate my experiences and how I feel and think. And now comes the rant part of this. I want to talk here about the irritation and total lack of patience that I have for people who only look at things as valuable when valued extrinsically, are paid for by someone else with money. I've lost most of my material possessions. My husband and dog have died, and now I'm homeless and very poor and have very little money and possessions to my name. But with these experiences, I can tell you what I value higher than anything that can be bought or sold. I value things like self-awareness, compassion, empathy, humility, self-reflection. My writing is my lifeline. Most of the work that goes into all of the arts is never seen or valued or even understood by consumers and patrons. The process, the germination, the research, the experimentation, the practice. Much like a play where the performance itself is the tip of an iceberg of all that goes on backstage, and with the theater techs and stage hands, not to speak of the weeks of rehearsal and set building and costume making, of the auditioning, and of all the years every single individual involved invested in learning and honing their own skills, as well as crafting the work that they're all collaborating on together to make a performance, which you see. My whole life I've struggled with people who have devalued and dismissed the writing I do because I don't make money at it, and because I'm open about how crucial it is to my psychological health, how I'm intrinsically driven to write. I love the process of writing. I love it so much, more than anything else. I've had it dismissed as less valid because it's just healing. The theme of things only being considered serious writing if someone else pays for it. I reject extrinsic valuation of everything I do, saying that nothing about me or my skills are valid or of value unless someone gives me money, is the worst kind of classist snobbery, but it's also so pervasive throughout our culture. I feel pity for people who have a system of values that's so upside down if I weren't so fed up with them. I'm more aware and honest with myself about how my life and writing are intertwined now, having had these experiences. I believe that all of the arts are at their best when they're transformative. I mostly don't write to tell other people what I think and feel and experience, but to put it into context, to make connections, and to be transformed by what I discover on the page. Since I started writing in this fashion, I discovered that even in my darkest hours, I can write. I can go to the page and at the very least bring out words for what's going on inside of me. And this is why, even when none of my other coping skills are working, I can at least do it. Even if I don't feel it changes how I feel, it does help me hang on. It helps move me through whatever I'm going through. I may be stuck where I am physically. I may not be able to get out of bed for the pain. I may feel like I'm treading water desperately, but my writing moves on and on and on and on and on. So I write. I write a lot, and I love it. If not for this writing, I wouldn't be alive. Thank you for watching.